Between May 1st and May 15th, 809,638 airline seats disappeared from American airspace before most of the country had finished its morning coffee. The cheapest of them cost $39. The fare class they belonged to no longer exists. Spirit Airlines stopped flying on May 2nd. 4,119 flights cut from the schedule in a single announcement. 17,000 people showed up to work that week, not knowing it was their last. The bright yellow planes that spent 3 decades forcing down the price of a domestic ticket were grounded before sunrise, and the carriers that outlasted them took about 4 days to start repricing. Detroit Metropolitan Airport. Just after midnight, May 2nd. Flight NK-1833 pushes back from the gate, full of passengers who don't yet know they're on a piece of history. The pilot lifts off, flies 2.5 hours through the dark, lands in Dallas-Fort Worth. By the time those passengers grab their bags off the carousel, the airline they just flew on technically no longer exists. Spirit started in 1983 as a Michigan charter bus company, hauling people to Atlantic City casinos before someone decided the margins were better in the air. They rebranded as Spirit Airlines in 1992 and spent the next 15 years as a mid-sized domestic carrier that nobody in the industry particularly worried about. Then, around 2007, CEO Ben Baldanza decided to try something nobody had fully committed to in America. Strip the ticket down to almost nothing, charge for everything else separately. Carry-on bag fee, seat selection fee, printed boarding pass fee. The fare drops to $39 and the passenger opts into every add-on they want or doesn't. Baldanza called it the bear fare. He was blunt about it in interviews. The fee model wasn't a trick, it was a price transparency argument. You were already paying for bags and seats inside the ticket price at every other airline. Spirit just broke it apart so you could see it. Delta hated it, United hated it, and American ran op-eds against it. Then all three quietly copied it within 5 years. Every major carrier in America now charges for checked bags. Most charge for seat selection. Several charge for carry-ons on basic economy tickets. The model Spirit invented to survive against the legacies got absorbed by the legacies, who had the balance sheets to wait out the rough years Spirit never did. So what actually killed Spirit? Fuel is the answer everyone gives. The Iran conflict in early 2026 sent jet fuel prices climbing, and Spirit's restructuring plan, the thing keeping it alive after its second bankruptcy, assumed cheap fuel. Reuters reported a $100 million hit in March and April alone. Their CEO said the company ran out of runway. Except Spirit had been losing money since 2019. Hadn't posted a full year profit in 6 years. Filed Chapter 11 in November 2024, came out, then filed again 8 months later. A $500 million government rescue package fell through right before the shutdown. A Pratt & Whitney engine recall had grounded chunks of its fleet for months. By the time fuel spiked, Spirit was already bleeding from 4 separate wounds that each would have been serious on their own. $217 million. That's the wind-down budget the court approved just to dismantle what's left. Sell the planes, pay the lawyers, settle the leases, quietly turn out the lights through February 2028. Almost 2 full years just to clean up the mess one budget carrier left behind. Now here's the question nobody's actually answering yet. How did a 1990s upstart ever manage to charge $39 for a flight that cost an airline hundreds of dollars in fuel, labor, gate fees, insurance, and aircraft financing per seat? For about 15 years, 4 things lined up in Spirit's favor, and in the last 24 months, every single one of them broke. Cheap jet fuel was the first. From 2015 through 2020, the spot price sat below $2 a gallon for most of that stretch, hitting under $1 during the pandemic crater. Spirit, Frontier, and Allegiant built their entire fare math around that number. When fuel hit $3.50 in spring 2026, a 90% full Airbus A320 stopped paying for itself. Every seat sold, every bag fee collected, every $1.50 soda, and the plane still lost money on the trip. Then wages blew up the second pillar. Before the pandemic, a first-year first officer at a regional feeder airline earned as little as $35,000 a year. Some made $48,000. The whole budget airline business model required pilots to be that cheap. Then the pilot shortage hit. One regional carrier bumped first officer starting pay from $55 an hour in 2019 to $96 by 2023. Spirit's own new first officers now start at $84,000 a year. In January 2023, Spirit pilots ratified a contract with major increases across the board. That cheap labor era ended around 2022, and it is not coming back. Not on Spirit, not anywhere. Now meet the company that shows up in every airline earnings call, but most passengers have never heard of. Pratt & Whitney. They make the geared turbofan engines bolted onto Spirit, JetBlue, and dozens of other carriers. A manufacturing defect forced airlines to ground aircraft for months at a time for inspections.
Spirit at one point had dozens of planes sitting on a tarmac in Florida, leases still being paid,
generating exactly zero revenue. A fleet you're financing but can't fly is just a very expensive parking lot. And the fourth thing, this one is what sealed it. In 2024, a federal judge blocked JetBlue from buying Spirit on antitrust grounds. JetBlue walked, Frontier had already moved on. Spirit was left at the altar with a balance sheet that needed the buyer the court had just outlawed. When all four broke inside the same 24 months, there was nothing left to absorb the hit. Now, someone has to fill the physical void Spirit left. The gates, the slots, the routes. Gate space at a congested airport is not available on short notice. When Spirit walked away from Fort Lauderdale, its biggest hub, it held nearly 29% of the airport's total capacity. Those gates don't automatically transfer to another airline willing to charge $39. They get bid on.
Legacy carriers in Southwest have deeper pockets than the remaining ultra-low-cost players.
The airline that wins the gate is not obligated to match Spirit's fares. It is obligated only to pay the airport. What it charges the passenger is its own business. The 17,000 people Spirit employed face a split outcome. Pilots are, counterintuitively, among the most marketable workers in aviation right now. The pilot shortage that helped kill Spirit means a 320 rated captains are fielding calls from United, American, and Delta within days of the shutdown announcement. Ground crews, gate agents, reservation staff, different story. Those jobs don't transfer as cleanly, and the carriers absorbing Spirit's routes aren't necessarily absorbing Spirit's workforce. When Spirit forced its way onto a route, fares dropped. The Justice Department documented it during the JetBlue merger trial. Average fares fell as much as 17% whenever Spirit operated a route.
Researchers who ran their own analysis in 2024
found base fares on Spirit routes ran 21% cheaper than average. They called it the Spirit effect. Take Spirit off the route, and that price discipline disappears entirely. United, Delta, American, they don't lower prices to compete with each other. They lower them when somebody scarier shows up. Spirit was the scary one. The scary one just left the room. CBS News ran a Cirium data analysis the week of the shutdown. Fares on routes Spirit had already exited over the past 2 years jumped 23%, roughly $60 round trip. NPR reported consumer advocate William McGee warned everyone will be paying more now that Spirit is gone. Fort Lauderdale, Orlando, Las Vegas, Detroit, Newark, Houston, those are the routes taking the hardest hit. The $39 Vegas flight, its actual replacement, same dates, same baggage rules, clocks in closer to $130. The version with checked bags and a seat that reclines is the $239 ticket. This has happened before. In 1981, a former Texas International executive named Donald Burr launched People Express out of Newark with fares as low as $23 to Boston. At its peak in 1985, it was the 5th largest carrier in America. A year later, it was gone, absorbed by Continental after burning through cash it couldn't replace. When People Express died, fares on Newark routes spiked. The legacy carriers that had been forced to compete filled the vacuum and repriced at will. Every analyst who covered aviation in 1986 said the same thing. This is temporary. Competition will return, prices will normalize. JetBlue lost $795 million in 2024, more than double its losses the year before. Its stock is sitting under $5 a share. The Spirit ticket from 2 summers ago, the tight seat, the bag fee, the $1.50 snack, that confirmation email in your inbox is a museum piece now. That fare isn't coming back on Spirit, on whichever carrier takes the slot, or on that route at all. It expired on May 2nd while most of the country was asleep. Reuters called Spirit the industry's first Iran war casualty. That phrase is going to age strangely, because if the conflict had ended in February instead of dragging on, Spirit probably survives. The rescue deal closes, the fuel cost stays manageable, the story doesn't happen.
Which means somewhere in a Pentagon briefing room or a Tehran negotiation, decisions were being made that quietly determined whether a working-class family in Detroit could afford to fly to Florida for spring break. Every CFO still standing at a budget carrier is watching this play out and running the same math. Somewhere in a glass office in New York or Denver, there's a slide deck right now with the words Spirit scenario at the top. And whoever books a domestic flight for the next 10 years is the one writing the check.